I actually took a micro course that was about the societal implications of AI recently at CMU. We learned about all the different impacts that it could have, and we were allowed to use ChatGPT for the whole course. We were supposed to work alongside ChatGPT and put in our responses. It was definitely a productivity hack that way, but I do believe that people may learn a little less at the same time if they do not have the subject matter expertise, if they use it in the wrong way for just writing code or completing their assignments. They might not learn a lot.
Ruchi, thank you so much for coming on the Ken's Nearest Neighbors podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, of course. So obviously we're both Z by HP Global Ambassadors. That's actually why we're here today, because we're at one of the HP conferences. But you also have a really interesting background associated with Kaggle. You're a triple grandmaster, if I recall correctly. You're also finishing up your master's degree in information systems management. You're also an all-around really interesting person, and I'm happy I got the opportunity to talk to you.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
No problem. So one of the first things that I ask all my guests is, how did you first get interested in data? Was there a pivotal moment that something happened where you're like, wow, this is an interesting domain? Or was it more of a slow progression over time?
So for me, I had a lot of time during the pandemic, and I really wanted to explore what my area of interest really is, because at that time I was fresh out of college. I had just graduated, had completed my bachelor's in computer science back then. So I was sort of just exploring the field of data science, and that's when I discovered Kaggle, and I just went into the world of data science and there was so much for me to learn and experience, and that's how I entered the field. And I initially started off by learning how to data scrape, because that was something that was very interesting to me. There was so much data all around, and that's where I started.
What were some of the things you were most interested in scraping early on?
Early on, the first data set that I ever scraped was a movies and TV series data set. And that was across all the platforms, all the OTT platforms like Netflix, Amazon Prime, and Hulu, and Disney Plus, and all those things. So I just wanted a collective collection of all the TV series and movies that we can find on all these platforms, so that, because everyone was binging, right? Back then, there was so much time back then. So I just wanted one repository that could hold that, okay, this particular movie or TV show is available on this platform and this platform. So these are the places you can access. And that was the first thing I ever did.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
And if I remember correctly, your first Kaggle Grandmaster, I guess medal or award was in
data sets.
Yeah, data sets.
Yes.
That's really cool. Do you have any best practices for collecting data from data sets, or is there anything that, obviously you've produced a lot of data sets.
Right.
What do you especially like about that?
So one thing that I'd like to tell people when they are collecting data is to be mindful whether they are respecting the rules that are being set by the website. So if the website doesn't allow bots or scraping, so we should that's the first thing I check, because that could really land people into legal trouble.
So how do you check that?
So for any website, generally there's a Robotstxt file that we can go to, and then they have all the pages that are allowed by the website to scrape, and the ones that are not are listed. So I look into that closely before I try to scrape anything.
And so you access that by just the URL and then
and the
/robots.txt. Very cool.
Yeah.
So if I remember correctly, it is legal to even scrape those websites, but it's definitely frowned upon. You can be banned by those websites.
Yeah.
If you like Netflix and you scrape the data, they can ban you. That's not allowed. Right? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's very common on LinkedIn, which is a little frustrating, because LinkedIn has all this really interesting data. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, they're a little, I think, stingy with it, which is unfortunate, because that data would be really useful to help data scientists, help anyone really understand the job domain. I hope LinkedIn actually produces some tooling around that, because if we could have more access to that data, understand it a little bit better, I think that's a massive value add. So, how do you go from your datasets grandmaster, becoming a datasets grandmaster, to then onto notebooks, and then onto comments? What is that progression like?
So when I put out data sets first, people wanted to know what the data was about. And the notebook section is something that can be very explanatory when it comes to uploading a data set. Like, you can tell people what your data is about. You can do some EDA there. You can explain what the columns represent, show what could be the value addition for the data sets that I've uploaded. So that's what I used to do back then. And I had also simultaneously started delving into the discussions too at that time. I was just closely interacting with folks on Kaggle and just talking about new things that I learned or learning from them and responding about whatever I had learned from them and things like that.
Yeah, I really like that. I think that at a high level, there's something that you can take away from that, and maybe all aspects of your work or life, not just in data, is that those two things, they had synergy with each other.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
They feed off of each other. They help you grow in both of those areas.
Right.
And finding things, whether it's in data science, whether it's in your work, whether it's in maybe like even health, that feed off of each other, can be a scenario where you get how I view as like surplus, where the two individual things add up to more than the whole, right?
Yeah.
Because you get that, the bouncing effect. You get a lot of these different benefits, and I think that's kind of fun.
True.
Yeah.
I think all three of them actually have like a lot of synergy, like the data sets.
The competition stuff.
Competitions, I'm still exploring, still learning there. But yeah, I'd say that.
That's amazing. So, from after Kaggle, or like while you're working on Kaggle, how does your job prospects line up? Also, how did you decide to go back and do a master's degree, particularly in information systems management?
So back when I was during my undergrad, I really wanted to go towards like an MBA degree, but I didn't want to leave my CS roots behind. So that's when I came across this course at Carnegie Mellon, the Information Systems Management program, which was like a blend between the two. And actually, I had received an admit back then, but I deferred my admission by a year because I wanted to study in person. So I had that year where I was working at Colgate as a software developer. And side by side, I was also looking into Kaggle and doing things. That's
really cool. So what did you learn working as a software developer, kind of working in data, compared to maybe what you were initially studying or just doing Kaggle?
So I also realized that I made the right decision by moving towards data science. So yeah, that was something that was interesting to me. I also worked on data science projects at Colgate-Palmolive, and that was towards the end when I was about to graduate, before I started my program at CMU. So and one thing I realized is the importance of working in teams, be it any field, whether it's software development or whether it's data science. When it comes to code, we need to write code that's something people can understand and work with. So that's one thing that's common between the two, and obviously the expertise that comes with each field, that's always there.
Yeah. Well, one thing I think is really cool about Kaggle is that's a place you can really showcase that through the notebooks. Yeah. And also, it's something that you can showcase it, but it's also apparent to everyone, and they share your notebooks. It self-perpetuates. And a lot of people, I don't think, realize how important the clean code aspect is.
Exactly.
You can go into someone's GitHub and it's probably clean, it's organized, it's packaged, but
we can't reproduce it unless we understand it. So
precisely.
That's very important.
Precisely. Amazing. And so from there, did you go, when you went back to school, what was your approach to internships? What was your approach to trying to make a career for yourself in the domain?
So what I had done when I started on Kaggle was I tried to make my portfolio centric around everything data, and I was making notebooks and ensuring I display the skills that I have in a way that people can understand my skill set. So working on a variety of projects, not just one-track projects, but a variety of them, and being consistent and sharing that with the community through LinkedIn and the other channels like Twitter. So that is something that actually helped me get into this program, the Z by HP ambassadorship program.
So what was that process like for you? Did they just reach out, or did and how did they hear about you inherently?
So it was through LinkedIn. I was very regular with posting weekly. I was posting about the work that I was doing, and it was something new that I was trying out every week. And I think the fact that I was very active in the community back then was something that led me to this opportunity. And when it comes to CMU, like I kept that effort consistent, and that's what helped me land my internship at HP again, which was a great experience.
Cool. You know, I think it's really interesting, that progress. So you built a portfolio.
Yeah.
You were able to create a presence online. You actually had, you know, a company reaching out to you.
Yeah.
And then you were able to use that momentum to leverage into an internship, and then I hope it's okay to say now into a full-time job.
Yeah.
Which I think is really awesome. You know, what do you think other people can just learn from that process that you've gone through there?
So one thing would be that it's very important to have an online presence in the age where everything's like all the data is on the internet, everyone's on the internet actively. So we don't know when an opportunity might come our way. So we should make some place for us on the internet where we can have our work displayed so that people, if they do land up in our portfolio, they can see the skill set we have, and then if they do like that and it works, it's something that works for them, then it would be like a great opportunity for both parties.
Yeah. Something I've been thinking a lot about recently, I've been having a lot of conversations about, is the idea that there's a few people or a few opportunities that have a disproportionate impact on your career. So for example, HP, you know, they made you an ambassador, gave you an internship, and they give you a job. I think that's really cool. And like those opportunities don't come by very often. On the other hand, if you're putting yourself out there, right, you have a presence, you are creating a good portfolio, there's a lot of ways for people to find you on the internet.
Yes.
The probability of you finding one of those, whether a few companies, people, ideas, whatever it might be, that does have that disproportionate effect on your career increases. Yeah. And to me, that's really special. It's like, wow, you're opening up the world to give you the chance to have as much success as possible, and, and find those opportunities, or again, making them come to you. And I don't know, I've thought a lot about that. And it's like, wow, if I have the opportunities coming to me, I can select the ones that I think have the highest impact. Yeah, the highest, maybe even like expected value, right?
Yeah, true, that's true.
And to me, you know, I encourage everyone to try to have more, or, you know, like get more opportunities in. I mean, there's a chance if you're, you know, not going outside of your comfort zone or whatever it might be, you might still find these people, but the probability is lower. I mean, we're all hopefully, we're either data scientists or hoping to be data scientists, or within this domain. And if you're looking at purely the numbers, you want to maximize those.
Sure.
So, you know, obviously we talked about your school, your progressive work. We also talked a little bit offline about your passion or your enthusiasm for ethics in AI. I was wondering if you could tell me a little bit more about what you mean by that.
So when it comes to data ethics, the fact that I have looked into the world of data science and I've seen that people try to make solutions that work for that particular data set, I try to look at the broader side of things and see what kind of impact that application may have in the real world. Like, is it something that can be deployed worldwide right now? Is it something that has representation within the data set? Because we don't want to be unfair towards anyone, and we want our application to be something that's of great value to everyone. So my interest in data ethics sparked when I actually watched this movie called Coded Bias on Netflix. It was a documentary, not a movie. And that's when I learned about different things and the applications and the impact that certain products can have on different people. And it's very important to be mindful of such things.
Yeah, so something I've learned over time is that essentially all data has bias, right? All models also have bias because the data going in is biased. Yeah. You know, what do we do about that? Is it just awareness that we have to have? You know, is there even a solution? Like, what is the best possible ethical model for the AI advancements that are coming out?
The best way to ensure that a model is not as biased as it could be is like starting at the very first step, that is data collection, and ensuring that we have all the possible samples that can be representative of different scenarios or different people. And having that kind of data with consent, of course, is something that would help build a model that's kind of fair.
So what happens if, for example, we can't get access to all the data? Let's say, you know, we're working in like a fairly, like Switzerland or something, right?
Right.
And we're working with a specific data set. It was like, oh, we only have local people, but we're trying to make a global assumption. Should we just not use it? Or are there things that we should caveat it with? Like, what would the process be from your perspective?
So if we have data of just that particular country, then maybe it would be relevant only to that country, and we should probably just add a note saying, hey, this is something that only works for Switzerland at the moment, and it might not add up well, like a lot of value if you're from some other place, and it might create some sort of bias. So having like a disclaimer, because we don't want people going in and like finding that, oh, this is biased, because that's what happened with like ChatGPT. Like in the initial few days, it was just a research project, but then people started giving it prompts and then like, hey, this is biased. Like, yes, it's a research project, it's in development, but it received a lot of backlash that way.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think, there's a personal example that I have. So I did 23andMe, where I go in, I upload my, like I spit in a tube, and it gives me all of my genetics broken down. Right. And it is not very sensitive to people of East Asian descent. Like part of my family is Chinese, and it's not really, I don't think it's legal in China, so they just don't have as much data there. Yeah. And so a lot of the health markers and those types of things, they aren't as accurate for someone with half of my background, right? And there's another one called, I think it's Prometheus, that like breaks it down based on like a global population study. It's a little bit more intricate, and you can also set filters based on those different types of your different background. And to me, that was like a perfect example. It's like, well, 23andMe probably should tell me a little bit more about if these are going to be accurate based on my genetic makeup. Like they can tell that my genetic makeup is of at least some portion East Asian descent. Right. Whereas this other one, there's plenty of problems with the other one because it's based on like probabilities from research, not necessarily from, from like specific to me. It's like, hey, you have a higher probability of this. But I thought that was very, very fascinating. It's like, wow, the data means something different based on my individual personal background. And I'd like to know that. Like, maybe I'm at super high risk of something, and for the population I'm in, it's actually not that risky.
That's true.
Yeah. So you'd mentioned ChatGPT, you'd mentioned some of these large language models. How do you feel about them? And, do you think it's good that we have them, or do you think it's worse? Are they going to make the world a worse place?
I think it's going to make the world a better place. Like it's like a productivity boost when it comes to anything that is related to content, related to modifying content in different ways. So it can be beneficial, but it needs to be used the right way. Like people need to understand what are the implications of using it in a specific context or something. Like, for example, if someone had to draw up a legal contract or something, and they cannot just resort to ChatGPT for that, they should go to a lawyer, they need to go to an expert for something like that.
This episode of Ken's Nearest Neighbors is brought to you by Z by HP, HP's high compute, workstation-grade line of products and solutions. Z is specifically made for high-performance data science solutions, and I personally use the ZBook Studio and the Z8 workstation. I really love that the Z workstations can come standard with Linux or WSL2, and they can be configured with the Data Science Software Stack Manager. With the Software Stack Manager, you can get right to the work of doing data science on day one without the overhead of having to completely reconfigure your new machine. Now back to our show.
Interesting. So you're still technically a student, correct?
Yeah.
How do you feel? I mean, there's been a lot of controversy around using ChatGPT in schools. I wonder from technically an inside perspective, how do you feel about that?
So I actually took a micro course that was about the societal implications of AI recently at CMU. And we learned about like all the different impacts that it could have. And we were allowed to use ChatGPT for the whole course. Like that's what we were allowed to do, and we were encouraged to do so. Like we were supposed to work alongside ChatGPT and put in our responses. And it was definitely a productivity hack that way. But at the same time, I do believe that people may learn a little less at the same time if they do not have the subject matter expertise, if they use it in the wrong way for just writing code or completing their assignments. They might not learn a lot.
Interesting. So, I view it in a fairly similar way.
Yeah.
But I also view it as a complete failure of education if they can't adapt to ChatGPT. Right? The teachers also have access to ChatGPT.
Right.
It can help them schedule lessons plans. You could probably ask ChatGPT, how would you make a lesson plan or teach a course that would still teach the students even if they were using ChatGPT.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
There's this whole problem where it's like, oh, the students are evolving, us teachers have to stay the same. As a college professor myself, I think that's ridiculous. We should be innovating how we teach. We should be figuring out how to leverage this new technology into something that enhances the education system of our students who are also using this technology.
Right.
Maybe that ingrains us kind of deep with the technology itself, but to me, that's like a no-brainer. Like you should be. It's in my personal opinion a failure broadly in education that we're not innovating at the same rate as students are innovating to like cheat in the state, right?
Exactly. Yeah. There should be programs where like people can learn better. Like this could tailor specific experiences for students, like something that's more suited to their learning habits, or that would be definitely something that should be accommodated into the lesson plans. At schools.
I mean, I also, this might be like a tirade of mine on education, but I think education is flipped, right? I think you should listen to the lectures when you're at home. You should be consuming and learning the information there. And then when you're in class, you should be applying it, right? You should be coding in class and having the professor, be able to give you feedback on the things that are the most challenging, right? The hands-on stuff, rather than just sitting in a boring lecture, wasting both yours and the professor's time because you could have just recorded it and it would be virtually no difference of an experience. But I'll get off that soapbox. How do you think people learning computer science or infrastructure or data science, how do you think that's most effectively taught?
I think I agree with you on that. Like if maybe in the future with the rise of ChatGPT, if we have like video lectures integrated somehow, and we could have like questions being asked by students directly, like feeding questions into ChatGPT, getting answers, and doing all the learning at home, and actually going into class and asking the professor for the real subject matter questions that they have or doubts that they have, and all those things could be addressed. That's something ChatGPT cannot handle, because obviously like there is limited information that's fed into the model, but the real stuff, something that that's learned with experience or just a person's career, that's something that the professors can only help with. So coding in class and asking doubts and questions would probably have more value than they currently do.
Yeah. So. Now that I think about it, I felt like I was an unbelievably effective student especially in terms of learning. And the way I did that is when I was in grad school for computer science, I took all the courses online. I watched all the lectures in 2x speed. And then I would go into office hours and I would just grill the professor about all the questions I had, why certain concepts didn't match up. And the professors are fine. They're bored in office hours. No one goes to office hours a lot of the time. Maybe at Carnegie Mellon they do, but
very few.
Yeah, but in my case, like I got undivided attention from the professor. I got to pick their brain about all these questions that I had to learn the material better, and he couldn't do anything about it because no one else was there, and he had those office hours. And luckily, they liked me, I think. But to me, that's like, I built that system for myself. It wasn't the institution encouraging that type of structure, which again, I think is a little bit disappointing. Yeah,
I think the learning, the pattern that people learn at every college or university is very important that way. So it could be tailored to different universities and the culture would really impact it. But with ChatGPT, things could change and maybe people could focus on the real things that are of actual great value.
I mean, I'm a huge believer, and I probably hammered this home in this episode, that education needs to innovate. I mean, formal education, because you have free courses, free or really cheap courses that are essentially just as good, actually arguably a lot better because the production value is higher. They have to make it once and make it really good. A professor has to do the same lecture over and over and they get bored and it just, it's not relevant. It's not up to date. And to me, if these institutions don't innovate, hopefully with the help of ChatGPT or some of these other technologies, it feels like it's wasting a lot of students' money, right?
That's true. We invest a lot, when it comes to master's degrees or even bachelor's for that matter. So we should definitely get the value out of that. And I prefer courses that way because we can literally learn at our own pace. When we're at school, we need to rush with our assignments, rush with catching up on whatever was taught in class. And it's very hurried, the whole semester. At least at CMU, it's very hectic. We have to be on top of things. Otherwise, we don't know when we will slip behind.
Yeah. Well, that to me is, I see basically I have friends that have kids now. I get to see how education is structured. And the way education is structured, it really only caters to the average student. Maybe like a 20%, like I guess maybe like 40% of the students would fall into that average category, right? Because then everyone else is on the tail. I mean, I guess in theory it'd be 64 if you have 64%, if you have or 64, 68%, if you have a one standard deviation on either direction, right? But the students that are really good and are learning fast, they're bored the whole time.
Right, that's true.
And the students that are not up to date, maybe they miss some lectures or whatever it is, they're really struggling. And so you're only reaching like kind of this core middle, and the people on the tails, unfortunately even the brilliant people on the end of the tails aren't doing that well because they're just outpacing the class. And you're 100% right with the online learning or the class learning, going at your own pace, it lets every single person in that class or interested in that subject go at the speed that's appropriate for them.
Exactly.
And I would love to see innovation. I mean, I guess there has been innovation there with online courses, but that's one I get really fired up about, because I was one of those students that was too far behind. And then in grad school, I was too far ahead because I actually learned how to study. But I digress. So, we've talked about how you've actually enjoyed using ChatGPT, you see the value in it. What are some of the best use cases that you've seen? How do you like to use it personally?
So generally, like, we have a lot of coding assignments, and one thing at universities that I don't like very much is we need to actually explain every line of code. So I just throw my code in there and get comments out, which is amazing. That's one thing I regularly use it for. And maybe if I'm starting something new, I don't want to start from scratch. So like I just say that, hey, I'm doing this. Could you give me like a boilerplate code? And that's where I start from. Because I don't want to spend too much time just writing everything from scratch.
You don't have to import all the packages.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't have to do all that.
Just like the skeleton, then obviously like it's not going to have the data I'm working on. So I need to do that part on my own. Yeah.
I think what I've enjoyed about it is it reduces a lot of the friction I have.
Yeah.
So it's easier for me to start projects, because a lot of the time you're like, oh, I have to configure a new environment. I have to open up all these notebooks. I have to do the boilerplate code and then fill it in. And it just makes it easier for me to do more of the fun stuff and less of the unfun stuff.
Yeah, the boring stuff.
Yeah, although I've been like trying to create this data pipeline, and it is like real stuff I have to do, and it hasn't been quite as fun as I was hoping. But at the end of the day, I should probably just call one of my data engineer friends. Amazing. So, we've talked about the advancements of AI. We've talked about a lot about school, but I think we should sort of double down on that education stuff.
Yeah.
I've talked about how the education system, I think, is very flawed. How do you think, what do you have to say to students that you think could help them maybe improve their probability of success, improve their enjoyment of school, anything that could make their lives better?
One thing that has been very useful for me is planning out my day, because like I said, CMU is hectic, but I also want to focus on other things like outside school. So I also focus on Kaggle most of the times, whenever I do get time, especially on weekends. So I try to plan my week and try to stick to that schedule. Sometimes I use ChatGPT to help me plan things and set my schedule. But like planning out really helps, and staying consistent is something that I have always believed in, and it has helped me get great opportunities. So these two things, I
really like that. It seems like, creating some structure is really important. I also think philosophically, being a student is really scary.
It is.
You think everything hangs on your grades or what's happening in the moment. And I think it's important to remember, and it's refreshing to remember, that a lot of where you go, it doesn't necessarily
rely on grades.
It doesn't rely on your grades, or it doesn't even rely on what you study. Like, I have a lot of friends that are doing things that are completely different than what they went to college for. Like most of the data scientists I interview, they didn't go to college for, they obviously didn't go to college for data science, because that didn't exist when they were in college. But most of them didn't even go for computer science. Most of them didn't even go for statistics. It was something else. And then they got into this field. I think my friend Tina Huang made a LinkedIn post recently where she was talking about how, she went to school starting in, I think it was biology. She didn't like that. She ended up in software engineering and data science, and now she's a YouTuber, right? Like who would have projected that? Who could have possibly known? You know, how much do you think she probably worried about all those things? You know, I'm sure she worries a lot, right? But to me, that's really inspiring. Is that okay? Like, you should care and you should do a good job, but not everything hinges on your success right now on this test or whatever it might be. And sometimes taking the pressure off actually improves your performance. I've learned that. Learned that from sports.
I always make it a point that I go to the gym twice a week just to like let some steam off and like refresh. So that's also there built into my schedule very responsibly and consistently.
So you've talked about ChatGPT, changing gears just a little bit, in your work as a student.
Yeah.
How do you think ChatGPT stands to change what's done on Kaggle? Do you think that that's like a threat to competitions? Do you think it's something that will help people and just make the overall platform better? Or like, what's your view there?
So when it comes to Kaggle, I think it would be like a productivity boost. Again, like that's the only thing I refer to ChatGPT as, nothing else, because at the end of the day, it's our expertise in the particular domain that we are in to master or like excel at what we do. So it would definitely help people get started on what they're working with, but it wouldn't help them like finish something completely with all the expertise that would be required for solving that particular problem. So yes, it would help them get to a point where it would be very quick to get to the finishing line, but it won't take them all the way.
Yeah. So it seems like you're saying it could help with innovation because of speed to market. I know that, like, I was talking to Theo a couple weeks ago, and he was talking about a huge portion of what he starts with is just looking at all the other notebooks, like seeing what other people are doing. And it seems like ChatGPT could actually help consolidate some of that, which is really neat.
Oh, I haven't looked into that yet.
Yeah, interesting.
But again, that would be notebooks from before, right? Like from before 2021.
Yes,
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
Amazing. Ruchi, what else do you have going on? How can people learn more about you? How can people connect with you, follow you, any of those types of things? The floor is yours.
I think the best way to connect with me would be LinkedIn, because that's where I'm most active on. And I'm also very active on Kaggle, where I keep posting about my data science work. And Twitter would also be a good way.
Amazing. I will link all of Ruchi's different links, LinkedIn, Twitter, what was the last one? And Kaggle, of course, in the description below. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.